Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode. Who is defining the fear? Today's episode, I would like to look into the idea of fear, its implication, how does it arise, what does it mean when it arises, what's the point? What's the point of fearing the world you're in once? Pretty much is the idea of today's episode. Now, of course, any human being who looks at life, there is a condition, a circumstance of analysis. That means your eyes perceive a physical, real landscape. And because there is a different density, you can say, between an event that is physically taking place and an event that takes place in your mind before physically taking place, you can see how there is fear. Fear sometimes, I feel this, the more observant the person is, the more actually fear they will have. Do you know, the more you see, the more there is to fear, believe it or not. There's a quote. There's a quote that comes to us from a Sufi mystic poet from 700 years ago, a man of exceptional word choice. The quote comes to us from a man named Hafiz Shirazi. And Hafiz says, fear is the cheapest room in the house. I would like to see you living in better conditions. To the mystical mind, fear was a lack of effort behind the eyes. Now, later on in this talk, I will go into a quote tunnel to see what others have said about fear, but I'm going to attempt to share certain personal conclusions I've got from fear. You see, from a religious context, there was a time where I was very interested to see what does the idea of wisdom mean. You know, sorry, what does the philosophy mean? And then I saw that philosophy, the word means philosophia, the love of wisdom. And then I wondered, what is wisdom? And I noticed that wisdom seems to be acknowledging the program you're in. Do you know? That means if you're on a soccer field, the wisdom is based on the intention of the environment to some degree. How's the environment moving? From a religious angle, it was very interesting because I wondered, what is wisdom from a religious sense if everything is is found through a predestined divine will? I wondered about what does wisdom in a religious context mean, and I remember I saw some videos online, and the notion was that religion in a religious context, when there is other forces at work, it's fear of not seeing what is there. So you can say fear of God in the through a religious lens is wisdom. Why? Because God is how the phenomenology is being moved. You see, the difference between the religious mindset and the secular mindset is the religious mindset is seeing an agency outside of the personality. That means you can say when a theist looks at the world, they are seeing the world that they did not create. But when you can say an atheist looks at the world, they are seeing a man-made world. The meaning of the world is man-made. Now, in the religious sense, so that's why I'm sharing it, fear was fear of the divine will, fear of the laws of nature which came from a mind. So that means there was a fear of the mind of nature in the religious sense, which led to wisdom. And there's a fear of the body of nature, where in a secular sense it leads to wisdom. Do you know? That means wisdom is like not pressing that button that releases a nuclear bomb, you know, in a physical, secular context, I would say. In my life, I've had moments where I've, of course, experienced fear. You know, and the fear has been different kinds. I've experienced fear behind my eyes in my inner realms, and I've experienced fear in front of my eyes, and sometimes I've experienced the fear that was behind. You know what that means? That means like behind my eyes, but it was implementing in front of my eyes. That means there has been many times where I have looked at this world and it's just fast forwarded in my mind towards a void, an emptiness. That means if the person wants to, you can extract, you can perceive fear in the past, in the present, in the future. You know, it's as if you were given a choice to ski on the whole hill. You know, you have a choice to go anywhere. And so the human being can navigate their attention to states of mind where they are, you can say, weaker archetypes have found them before the stronger ones. Because on some level, human beings, it's like, what is it? It's a whack-a-mole of ideology. The person is raised in a certain way, identifies a certain way, gets different experiences, re-identifies, you know, with that same certainty. Or the certainty may become an uncertainty. So here's the thing. If the person thinks or considers that this life has to 100% be known, 100%, that means you're a person who wants to know everything in this life, there will be a fear of the container, as if you are a cup. And this cup is looking at the valve of intelligence. And the valve of intelligence, the water is running, and the water goes and starts filling up the filling up the cup to the brim. And when it gets to the brim, it overflows. And I feel that the human being is a unique ideological container for something that never was an idea. We are an objective and subjective containment of an energy that never was linearizable. You could never make it linear. There is something where no man can measure the wind. And when I say you can't measure the wind, I mean in a, not that you can't, like there's a different instruments for that, but I'm saying you can't measure the wind in the sense that if there is a movement where you can't refer through visibility, there is nothing. That means, you know, a person can fear something that is there in front of them, or they can fear something that was never there, yet in their eyes it is, you know. So, guys, my attention has come to the chat section. Charles says instinctive fear comes and goes with the stimulus. When the tiger leaves, mechanical fear is conditioned and continues on after the stimulus is gone. I was talking, I don't know if it was on mute or not, so I'm going to repeat. So, Charles, I responded to your comment, and it is true. There's a notion that there's a fear that is based on an actual event. And then there's a fear of other events that are not here. That means the child, imagine a young child came to play, and a foolish adult came to the child and shouted at the child, "You can't play! Get out of here!" And that little child has no comprehension, has no understanding, but the intensity of that communication may cause the child fear. So the next time the child goes to play, the event of the adult shouting at the child is there. So then this child will grow up wondering why it can't play with the other kids. Why it can't be comfortable being in a space where others are comfortable. I personally have this. I mean, there is a whole cultural dimension of conditioning to it that, like I'm a person who is, bilingual. That means there's like two different ways the story of the world animates for me, linguistically. That means every object I see, it's as if I don't just have one word for it. There is different ways of interpretation of it, But what it is really is events that have happened but have not stopped behind your eyes. I feel that is fear. Fear is you not realizing the value of the future. Because fear is in everything. Do you know? But the thing is that the fear changes. The same stimulus after some point doesn't bother you. You can say, I could personally tell you when I was young, I remember my eyes seeing TV screens that probably I shouldn't have seen at that age, at a very young age. And it was a situation where, because I could not process the meaning and the implication of what I was saying, it became an intimidation factor in my mind. That means many of the things that I find that I have a certain discomfort with, or I cannot stand in front of for too long, are events that manage to reach manage to shift my archetypal conscious identity. That means I don't know. Me personally, like I don't have any memory of it, but I personally think there was something that happened in my youth. Something. Maybe I was a little kid and somebody shouted at me or something. But in my youth, I distrusted the world. I'm not joking. When I say I distrusted, not like a 24/7 distrust. It was just that I distrusted myself in the world, which was a fear. I feared being myself because I felt the world only accepted what it knew. And then I realized the world doesn't know anything. The world we're living in is like Jon Snow, guys. You know nothing, Jon Snow. For me, fear is natural. Fear is like a cloud in the sky. It comes and goes. That means many of my fears in childhood, they evaporated. They just evaporated. I just stopped caring for them as factors, or it happened. I remember when I was young, I had a fear of speaking. Do you believe that? I had a fear of speaking, not because I didn't know what to say, because I felt that when I would speak, it wouldn't fall into the model of the personalities I had seen. It's like a person who's a violinist, but is beside a bunch of drummers. Do you know? And so it's like everybody's talking about, let's say they're all talking about music, and everybody's talking like a drummer, and this violinist suddenly feels he can't talk like a violinist. He feels he has to be a drummer. That was the kind of metaphor I can use to explain what I felt was going on in regards to a sort of opening of the psyche into different ways that the world can happen. Because I noticed something about fear that made me laugh at my fears. This doesn't mean I don't get afraid, but it means that the chances of me getting afraid is less because now I look at the phenomena. Before, when I would get afraid, I would stop looking, stop caring to comprehend the situation. Here's the thing, it's like when the person sees failure, some people stop. They stop early. But when the person sees the success, they don't stop. And that's where hope is born. Hope means you see the success and you're almost there. That's what it means. That means I don't know how people in history have interpreted the idea of hope, but you cannot have hope if you cannot see the possible. And perhaps there was a reason when Napoleon said impossible is a term in a fool's dictionary. You know, this life is incredible. There's a story I want to share with you. A story of very profound implication. A story of two frogs in this town called Frogville. And these two frogs suddenly fall into a hole. There's a mysterious hole, and these two frogs fall into this small hole, and all the frogs from Frogville come and circle around the hole, and the two frogs are trying to jump out. Both of them are freaking out trying to jump out. Now something unique happens, something uncommon, something unthinkable. All the frogs around the ditch where the two frogs are in and trying to jump out of this hole, these two frogs are trying to jump out. All the frogs, they are not good frogs. It's as if the mob gets possessed by cruelty, and all the frogs are like, yeah, we've never seen these frogs die, let's see them die. You know, and so all the frogs look at these two frogs that are in this hole, and they're like, dead frog walking, you can't get through this, you guys are gonna be there forever, don't even try, don't even go forth. And this endless wave, as if like this heat wave of arrogance of the world that never saw you, you know? So guys, check out this story. Just this story, I'm reading the comments in the chat section. It's just this story is gonna, the moral of the story is gonna be an ultimate answer to it. What happens is that one of the frogs, its soul breaks, and the frog goes to the corner of the hole, one of the frogs, and closes its eyes, stops trying, stops continuing, and it dies. So one of the frogs just goes to the corner, hears the world, and is like, okay, it's like going with the flow, and the frog's like, the world is telling me to die. Maybe I should die. And the frog goes to the corner and stops moving, just closes its eyes. It gives up. There is the other frog, and all the frogs in the frog wheel who are above the hole, they're all like, yeah, we got one of them, let's go for the second one. You know, and then this time it's strange. The more these frogs start amping up the hatred, amping up the effed up mob mentality, these frogs say, you can't get through it, and they're like, let's increase the hate and all this. And to their surprise, the second frog in the hole is just getting energized. It's just getting more excited. The frog's getting a smile on its face, and all the frogs above the hole are like, what is this? We're insulting this guy. This guy's getting more energetic. Let's insult him more. And so they keep insulting, and this frog is getting blissed out, overjoyed. And this frog suddenly jumps out, and it's a Neo moment, and all the frogs are like, no way, this is the chosen one. You know? And so the frog steps out, and all the other frogs in Frogville, they get a lesson of a lifetime, you know? But they realize something spectacular. They realized the frog that made it out of the hole was deaf. That frog couldn't hear the garbage being thrown at it. You see? That frog was deaf to the inefficiency. It doesn't mean the inefficiency is not there. It doesn't mean that you walk in a forest, you're not going to see a wild animal. If you walk in any forest long enough, you're going to come to a confrontation of nature. Nature's mind is going to embrace you. And it depends. For me, I feel that there is a collective intelligence on the other side of the coin of the human life. So the moral of that story is the fear didn't exist for the second frog because it didn't interpret the fear. And so you can say if fear is something we are extracting, we are concluding, then in some sense we are programming the fear in ourselves based on how we find meaning in the world. Because this was my strategy, guys. Let me tell you, there's many things in this life I have feared. And so many people in this life, if my whole life was like a GoPro camera and you could suddenly see that GoPro camera behind my eyes, imagine, you would see that there's many situations, even strange situations, where there was no reason for me to be uncomfortable and suddenly I've become uncomfortable. You know? And sometimes it's a calculation of a future potential. Sometimes the fear is not even local. The fear of the future or the past is non-local. The fear of the present is the only local fear. You know? It's the fear that is the closest that can bring pain. And it's this mentality where, imagine you are a person who you are walking, or imagine you're Gandalf from the Lord of the Rings, and the Balrog, or that creature of shadow and flame, shadow and fire, do you know? There's a scene where Gandalf looks at all the people in the Fellowship in Lord of the Rings, and he's like, "Run! This creature is beyond you. Like, you can't defeat this creature. This creature is beyond us." You know? And so they all run, and there's a situation where Gandalf is seeing this creature. You know? And the creature's like, "Can I pass, sir?" And Gandalf's like, "You shall not pass." Technically, it's like Gandalf was in the home of the Balrog, so Gandalf technically shouldn't have passed. Peter Jackson is honestly a genius. Anyways, the point is, there's a fear that you have to overcome yourself to be able to walk through that flame. And then there's a fear where you have to overcome your analysis of how you have considered the world to move. And the way you do this is Mr. Within's algorithm to fear, is that any situation, because I thought about this on a universal level, and I was like, okay, imagine I was born anywhere, anywhere in the world, and I had fear. What would the algorithm towards solving that be? For example, when a person tries to solve the Rubik's Cube, you can get as far as you want, but then there comes a situation where there's an algorithm required to handle a certain complexity. An algorithm with the assistance of other minds. That means in this life you can try to solve a problem and you can solve it to a certain level. Then when you can't solve it anymore, you will care about the knowledge of the world. That means I feel people will only truly care about knowledge if they have attempted to know the world without it first. Then you will understand why there's a meaning to education beyond the trials and tribulations of the economical sector. There was a time where I normally don't play with the images of my inner realms that much. What I mean by that is that when there is communication, of course, the mind expresses in accordance to how the program is running in the moment. But there's moments where the mind disidentifies with its own program of behavior, and the moment it does that, it taps into the unknown. And the moment you meet the actual unknown in this life, this is an experience I'm talking about, when you truly see there is an unknown element to existence and experiences simultaneity. You can see any sort of fear in this life, and you can always simplify it from a narrative analysis to a design-oriented level. Do you know how many things there are in this life where I have felt always, there is a phase in every art form, the spirit of everything in the moment, the spirit of the moment, that you have to walk as the fool so then you can care for the avenues beyond it. There is an avarice that must be surpassed. There is a selfishness of a great intensity where the human being feels hit by the unknown. That means literally imagine you were backhanded by the unknown. Your knowledge was backhanded by the unknown, as if you were like, is it this? Is truth this thing that I know? And the unknown was like, no! Bah! So the solution to a narrative, a story-based fear, is to simplify it to a level of design, you know? And you can always simplify things. Simplification for me is like taking a step back to look at the complexity again. Since childhood, I have a twin brother, and when we were kids, we were more than fascinated by science fiction, we were fascinated by fantasy. And I remember in the stories that we were little kids, like maybe 8 years old or something, and when we would play these games, these sort of games with these small characters, like small toy soldier, but they weren't soldiers, they were fantasy characters. When we would play that, I would always choose the mage. And for a long time, I wondered what was it so fascinating? And it was as if, like, when I remember seeing the movie Airbender, not the movie, like just seeing the scene from it, it was like, it was a moment for me when I realized man's true body can become the world. There was something about a human being that was synonymous, had a power infused with nature. You see, the power that comes from nature is not ideological, so it cannot be ideologically wielded. But a power that comes from the unnatural tends to be an ideology and tends to be a very not dangerous but heavy technology. That means the danger of something is based on your ability in the moment. Your fear is based on how able you feel you are. There was a situation when I was in the UK in 2014 when I had started giving these talks, and I had a girlfriend from Estonia named, anyways, I won't share her name here, but at the time. And her first name started with a B. But anyways, there was a situation where she had gotten into this conflict and I was with her in this public conflict. And there was a situation where she was living in a bad neighborhood, and for one moment I had to make a choice. I just had to make a choice. I got this intuitive feeling that we shouldn't go back to her place. Just this strange feeling. I don't know how to tell you. There's moments in my life where my emotions are not based on a linear analysis of the scenario. It's based on what I feel the whole moment is saying. And in that situation, I remember my legs it wasn't as if I froze, but my legs felt heavy, and this thought like a ringtone endlessly repeating in my mind came to call this specific friend when I was in UK Birmingham. So I was in this very strange situation, and in my mind just popped this friend's name endlessly. And I called the friend, and the friend was way more street than me and lived in UK and Birmingham. You know, Sanj was the name of the guy. And so Sanj, in that second, I called him and I asked him about the situation and told him the situation I was in. And in that second, he gave an answer, and he's like, "You don't know who they know. Get out of there." He instantly, it was as if he could see something that I couldn't, and my mind was like, call this person, get advice from him, you know. And that instant, I make the decision, and me and my girlfriend, I don't want to say her name, but like first name starting with a B. Let's call her Barry. You know, I don't want to say her full name, but anyways, what happens is we go back. She goes home the next day. Her neighbor says there were 12 people waiting outside your door. And it was this next level intuitive decision where I felt I dodged the tornado. You know, it was a very, very strange situation. And guys, there's a lot of details about it I can't tell you. But it was a very strange situation where my intuition, I felt, saved my life because I could get out of the story for a second and look at the situation from another angle. And that is the only way you can surpass fear, by looking at the fear and being like, thank you, you showed me one way the moment can happen, now let me show you. You see, in my youth, there was a sort of submissive mentality because I was raised in an environment, I could tell you, where there was an artificial need to be passive and not yourself. You see, this world is strange. It's the only place we have to actually be ourselves, but the way civilization is designed, we tend to not arise as ourselves. We tend to arise as the voice of the world. It takes a while to get to know that your mind is not the world, even though the world is in it. Similar to how Christ in Christianity, there's an incredible clue where Christ says to be in the world but not of it. To be in the world but not of it. To be in the fear but not of it. You see, I find it that it's easy for many people to realize they get inside a vehicle, they get to their destination or whatever, and they step out of the vehicle. But what if at your moment, how your meaning was emerging was a vehicle for your attention? And what if you can step out of the vehicle of how the subjective layer of meaning is placed upon the objective? So the question comes, who is defining the fear? And so we definitely know the dictionary is defining it. Honestly, guys, I'm going to see how the dictionary is defining fear. Let's see what Saint Dictionary has to say. So check this out, guys. Fear as a noun and as a verb. As a noun, the dictionary says an unpleasant emotion caused by the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Fear for, a feeling of anxiety concerning the outcome of something or the safety of someone. The likelihood of something unwelcome happening. A mixed feeling of dread and reverence. Now the verb. Be afraid of someone or something as likely to be dangerous, painful, or harmful. Fear for, feel anxiety on behalf of. Avoid doing something because one is afraid. Used to express regret or apology. Regard, with reverence and awe. You know? Fear, guys. If you take the F away, it's just an ear. This life is honestly, you observe and you act. You can say in its most simplest way that human beings are just doing two kinds of things. They are being movement and they are observing movement. When we observe movement, we feel that consciousness is the stillness and silence of the moment. When we actually move, we are in some sense defined by the movement. That means people, I feel, can fear others, they can fear themselves, they can fear their world, they can fear the afterlife, they can fear what was here before life. You know, you can fear anything. And the question should be, why isn't the person fearing everything? And this could even go for the notion, it's even in my own curious interest, that why is it that, for example, in addiction psychology, the person is not addicted to everything they do? Do you know why is it that addictions are in towards certain phenomena? Why is it, for example, we don't say we're addicted to drinking water? Do you know? Can anybody say they're addicted to drinking water? An addiction seems to be just something that repeats that the person doesn't want to consciously repeat. It seems to be a resistance of the inner realms and the outer realms. So the question should be, why isn't the person addicted to everything, you know, and why only certain specific things? And you can say those specific things, there were events where the personality was unauthorized. That means a person can do an action, and whether anybody sees it or not, because they are aware of themselves, they see it. And if that action is not good, or if the action is, let's say you do a bad action which nobody sees, only you see. I feel then the person can fear their own conscience. There has been times that I've gotten angry where poetically I felt, you know, poetically speaking, I felt there were angels from behind my conscious mind holding my rage. You know how, like, a friend of yours, you're at the club or something and your friend of yours gets angry and you instantly hold your friend and you're like, hey, you know, don't waste your energy on this, you know, and your friend suddenly realizes their anger subsides. Because usually people have this mentality where they want to win. That means the young soul seeks victory. The old soul seeks clarity. So guys, now is a good time to go into the quote tunnel and to see what people in history have said and how their inner realms have opened up to the idea of fear. And fear is something where it's like, here's the thing, you fear anything that you don't understand or you feel you're not allowed to understand. Imagine like a child, there's orange juice in the refrigerator, and a child goes to touch that, grab that orange juice, and suddenly someone comes and to that child and says, don't touch this orange juice. This orange juice is sacred knowledge, or this orange juice is not allowed to be touched by anyone. You know, only few people have drank orange juice. You know, you have to deserve to drink orange juice. That child would have made the phenomena overwhelming to itself at that point if the person believes, if the person accepts the words that did not arise from their eyes. So guys, in this quote tunnel, I want you to pay attention to how different human beings have acknowledged and analyzed the idea of fear, have articulated the idea of fear. Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu was a great tactician and also the author of The Art of War. Sun Tzu says, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. That means if you are conscious, what is there to fear? We tend to fear that which pushes us towards the unconscious, only to realize that the unknown will one day become the greatest source of joy, even though currently for many it's the greatest source of fear. Rosa Parks. I have learned over the years that when one's mind is made up, this diminishes fear. Knowing what must be done does away with fear. That means responsibility is a solution from Rosa Parks' view towards fear. That means if you're a person who's afraid in life, that means you haven't realized you need to be responsible for an existence in which nobody has your eyes. This is why I say there's nothing to believe in a changing world. You can only pilot consciously while you're conscious, you know, as a being. Clara Barton. I may be compelled to face danger, but never fear it. And while our soldiers can stand and fight, I can stand and feed and nurse them. Niccolo Machiavelli. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Yeah, of course. At that time, you know, it's fear was your shield. If people feared you, you were shielded. It was armor. Fear was armor back in the day. You know. So if somebody was scared of you, they wouldn't approach you. So technically, they wouldn't bother you. Franklin D. Roosevelt. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Bam. Franklin Roosevelt just hit the ball out of the park. This is it. The idea of fear is what is allowing the fear. It's like the blueprint to the fear, the story you're giving it. Okay. Let's continue with the quote tunnel, guys. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Always do what you are afraid to do. Plato. We can easily forgive a child who's afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light. Wow. Wow. That means you're afraid of the incredible opportunity to be. Sometimes it blows my mind how many people have stopped existing and how many people don't exist yet. And I feel honestly like I'm on the roller coaster now, and all the human beings to be born, they're on the lineup, you know? And now that we're on this roller coaster of life, where does the fear come from? You can be afraid of, for example, an individual based idea. That means something you fear, you fearing your own ability or your own strength in the storm. And there's situations where you fear something that is a collective fear. For example, I have this thought in the back of my head that if an alien civilization invades us, if an alien civilization invades us, are we prepared? Are we prepared? How far have we comprehended? We don't even know who we are. That means how embarrassing would it be if in the future aliens land down, let's say not a evil alien civilization, but a good alien civilization, and they're like, all right, human beings, time to make contact, and they're coming for the handshake, and imagine we have our own fashion and they have their fashion, and so the leaders of humanity and the alien leaders are there about to shake hands, and it's all being broadcasted live. And you see in that moment, the alien, before shaking hands to a peaceful agreement, says, who are you, human beings? Imagine the alien asks us, who are you? And we would be like, hey man, we were hoping you could tell us. You know? So, so I am saying, so if that alien civilization asks us who we are, we don't even know. We don't even know. We'll just tell them a story and they'll probably chuckle and be like, you guys aren't evolved enough. Bye. You know? Like, that's the thing. You know? There is so many things. Sometimes I think about everything I'm fearing now. The future generations, if they could see me, they would laugh at my fear. Have you ever feared something and felt like it wasn't something to fear? Later on realized it wasn't something to fear? Elon Musk has this story, which he shared in a YouTube video I saw from him. He said that when he was a kid, he was afraid of the dark. And then he picked up a science book, he read it, and he's like, it's the absence of photons. And he was no longer afraid of the dark when he had understood a way where the darkness wasn't the unknown imagination's overwhelmment. I would say that any time the person can't carry a weight, the weight is heavier than they can carry it, fear arises. Fear arises when the person sees that the strength of the arms changes. Your strength in this life, your attention, your energy levels, your vitality. You know, you know how many drops, raindrops, they fall alone in this world and they evaporate. And there's many raindrops that they fall into the ocean. That means they never experience evaporation on an individual level. For me, the definition of fear changes, which makes me realize fear is not something out there. It's just the feeling that what is here can be absent. That means because we are being alive, we fear the absence of life. And that fear in a survival manner has kept us here. That means those people, when a volcano happened and they didn't get out of they didn't want to leave their village, they got burnt down. But those who were like, okay, what's this, burning red stuff coming out of the mountain, maybe we should move. Those people survived. And that was the situation. That really our survival, there's a reason we're so information obsessed. People, they don't just hunger for food and basic survival needs, as we find physiological needs in Maslow's hierarchy. People want to continue. It's the spirit of the continuity of the animate. Aeschylus. There are times when fear is good. It must keep its watchful place at the heart's controls. That means what the fear is overcome from the heart's certainty. That means if fear is an emotional going out of control, then you can say the heart can bring it back into control. So it's the emotion that overwhelms. If the person can look at life and take it out of the context of a story format, for a second just sees the ethos as an alphabet of design, that means I sometimes see a person and it doesn't matter what they say, they are being an image from my view. Warren Buffett says, we simply attempt to be fearful when others are greedy and to be greedy only when others are fearful. It was a revolutionary insight for me into psychology when I realized everybody is being an actor in their own spotlight. That was one of the most revolutionary things I realized about the inner realms. That it translates through an acting modality due to the individual body. That means sometimes I think if we were like, what if humanity was in a way where we were two bodies? That means right now life has originated through like the evolutionary through an individualism. Okay, we're a single creature. But imagine we had evolved and everybody had two bodies. It was one mind but two bodies. Can you imagine that? Now imagine over time one of these bodies went invisible. And now we think we're one body, but we actually are getting information from two bodies. This is just to try to paint the picture. Louisa May Alcott. She says, I'm not afraid of storms, for I'm learning how to sail my ship. Yeah, that's a great quote. When you know how to navigate the individual, you will be comfortable in the collective. If you don't know how to navigate the individual, you will either wait for the collective to individualize you, or I don't know, something. There has to be some sort of transformation, either from the inside out or the outside in. Maya Angelou, guys, is there were quotes I remember reading from her that were revolutionary in regards to reacquainting one's eyes with the true nature of the cultural program. Maya Angelou says, "What is a fear of living? Question mark. It's being preeminently afraid of dying. It is not doing what you came here to do out of timidity and spinelessness. The antidote is to take full responsibility for yourself, for the time you take up and the space you occupy. If you don't know what you're here to do, then just do some good." You know, I mean, that's pretty much all you can say, really. In a situation where you either know your value and you pilot your experience through your attention, or you don't. And if you don't know your value, you know what happens? The world moves you. You know what happens if you don't confront a fear? That means something, you are afraid of something, but that's like a missing link. It's like a, sorry, not missing link, it's like a missing gap. It's like anytime there's fear, there's darkness in the room. There's some part of the room you're not seeing. It's an unknown variable, fear. Now, if the person doesn't make the unknown variable known, if the person doesn't see what their fear is, they will keep it as a fear. They will keep that unknown variable. I'll give you an example. This is why I feel it is better to see let's say you're afraid of a film. Okay, you're afraid of like seeing the ending of a film. I would say it is better to see that ending. What you fear is better to see. Let's say you're afraid of a film, you know, you're afraid of a certain scene. I would say see that excuse me. I would say see that scene. Confront the fear and you will have more information than you did if you hadn't seen what the fear was about. Sometimes when I fear something, I'm like, why? Why? Why am I fearing this? And then when you go understand the situation, the fear transforms. Honestly, it transmutes into a different value. Helen Keller. Avoiding danger is no safer in the long run than outright exposure. The fearful are caught as often as the bold. That means, yeah, everybody experiences fear. There's unknown variables in every person's life. It's just that when an unknown variable happens, what do? Do you ignore it and avoid it, or do you actually go see why the unknown variable has arose in your moment? True nobility is exempt from fear. Marcus Tullius Cicero. Thomas Paine. I love the man that could smile in trouble, that can gather strength from distress, and grow brave by reflection. 'Tis the business of little minds to shrink, but he whose heart is firm, and whose conscience approves his conduct, will pursue his principles unto death. John F. Kennedy, a nation that is afraid to let its people judge the truth and falsehood in an open market is a nation that is afraid of its people. Ronald Reagan, do not be afraid to see what you see. Wow. Never knew Ronald Reagan was capable of those kind of quotes. Thomas Jefferson says, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, that his justice cannot sleep forever. Wow. A justice that cannot sleep forever. What an incredible concept. A justice that is sleeping. A solution to humanity's distress that is sleeping. That means it's like our answers to a lot of the problems we see now. They are like sleeping giants. And the role of human beings is to wake them up. That there is really one option. We go forth or we enter the void. That is the choice. You either, when an unknown variable arises, you instantly go to wonder about it, or you stay in a certain bunker of knowledge, sheltered from the battlefield that needed you in it. An advanced civilization doesn't build itself, guys. It's not like the birds and the pigeons and the squirrels are going to build an advanced civilization for us. The human being has to engage the human effort. And if you do not care for your world, let me tell you something savage. You will feel you don't deserve to care for yourself, because you are a part of the world as well. This is why if you are fighting your view of the world, you are fighting yourself. That means that was a shock factor for me. That all this violence, all the human beings that have been killing each other in history, they have never seen each other. They have seen what they knew about themselves in the other. That means war was always for the blind. Those who could not see that human life was rare. That it didn't happen often. That this civilization needs every push it can. Because right now, the care and compassion of the human being, it is limited in caves of small groups. It's as if people see that they're a human being in the mirror, but they do not see the species. And it's so easy to run away from what you dislike. It's too easy. That's the issue. It's too easy to forget a dying world, or the dying potential of the world. C.S. Lewis says, no one ever told me that grief felt so like fear. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe says, it is the strange fate of man that even in the greatest of evils, the fear of the worst continues to haunt him. It's just a potential, guys. I mean, you can say the fear is one side of the coin. That means, how can you comprehend fear without love? I'm serious. How can you comprehend? It's impossible. It's like night and day. They require each other. So, guys, shadow systems in the shadows. Nice. System of shadows. Shadow Systems Limited says, what is your opinion on artificial intelligence? Is it truly artificial if it exists on Earth? I could tell you human beings have been behaving artificially intelligent before we create super intelligent computers, like actual artificial intelligence. But the thing is, for me, it depends on how aware the phenomena is of nature. So if we're a natural being, but we don't behave naturally, can we call ourselves a natural being? So our AI, our artificial intelligence's nature has to do with how much it can see nature to, in some sense, ride the waves of the moment. We're all surfing the moment through some sort of ideology, you know? Nobody has the same kind of ideology, even though people may come into an acceptance. The Buddha spoke about this. The Buddha said an object, its nature is empty. That means two people can look at a cup of tea and one of them could think the tea is warm and one of them could think the tea is ice cold. That means it's this, but the tea is, imagine, just, I don't know, room temperature or something. So I'm telling you, it's one of those situations where your eyes are suggesting the limits of perception's activation. And I've noticed that fear is something I don't care about, and that's why I have it. That means anything you don't care about, your attention is refused to look at, and fear is kind of like avoiding the event at hand. You know, technically, if we think we're natural, we have to consider all alien, extraterrestrial potential life is also natural, you know? The Buddha said the nature of objective phenomena is empty, and it's as if every conscious viewer, upon gazing at the object, imbues it with the nature. You can see young children, they look at a teddy bear, and the teddy bear is like their best friend or something, you know, the toy they're playing with. The toy has been imbued life by their own mind. Now, for human beings, the play at childhood transfers into work. You know, so it's as if it's like it's just we're playing with at higher levels, you can say. Alan Watts made a point of this as well, that uh, the hardest action is hard if it is not seen to be rhythmically simple. Okay, so of Gold of One in the chat section says, what about hate in relation to fear? I believe hate is a sign of weakness. Hate is a sign of banishment and exile. That means, imagine someone is saying like something. Let me tell you, hate is burning down a forest that you're living in. That's hate. I personally remember writing down a sentence about fear. I said, kill fear before it kills you. What I mean by that is not a physical notion of the idea. I mean, if you fear something, it's like you can, as from an like if you were an economist, be like, hey, wait a minute, what is the opportunity cost to this fear mindset? That means it's like the same time the person is being afraid. Guess what? That's the same time where if you wanted to be brave, that would be the only time where it could happen. You know? Oh my God. Okay, guys, let's see. More questions. Shadow System says, do you have any opinions on the Mandela effect theories? By Mandela effect, you mean like false? You mean like a group of people remembering an event in a wrong way? Is that what you mean by? I would say that the Mandela effect is a suggestion that we are creating reality. And we are creating reality in the sort of receiving signals. There was a time where I was like, okay, there's one view where you think thoughts are just every person is creating thoughts. You know, every person is just having their own thoughts. Or another way is like we are antennas, and when we are receiving signals, which each antenna translates in their own way. So when we realize that the signal and the antenna are different, that would be for the first time where truth and form will be in separate rooms, poetically. So, so in what way shadow systems do you mean? Like, in what way do you want to know if I have an opinion on it? Like in reality, the Mandela effect. I mean, what can I say? I can say if there was a Mandela effect, there must have been a Mandela cause, you know? Henry Ford has this quote. He says, one of the greatest discoveries a man makes, one of his great surprises, is to find he can do what he was afraid he couldn't do. Francis Bacon says, prosperity is not without many fears and distastes, adversity not without many comforts and hopes. Audrey Hepburn, pick the day, enjoy it to the hilt. The day as it comes, people as they come. The past, I think, has helped me appreciate the present, and I don't want to spoil any of it by fretting about the future. I mean, of course, the present is always the celebration room. Lucius Annius Seneca. A person's fears are lighter when the danger is at hand. Hunter S. Thompson. There is no such thing as paranoia. Your worst fears can come true at any moment. Rainer Maria Rilke. One had to take some action against fear when once it laid hold of one. Thich Nhat Hanh. Fear keeps us focused on the past or worried about the future. If we can acknowledge our fear, we can realize that right now we're okay. Right now, today, we're still alive, and our bodies are working marvelously. Our eyes can still see the beautiful sky. Our ears can still hear the voices of our loved ones. Benjamin Disraeli. Fear makes us feel our humanity. Jiddu Krishnamurti. What is needed, rather than running away or controlling or suppressing or any other resistance, is understanding fear. That means watch it, learn about it, come directly into contact with it. We are to learn about fear, not how to escape from it. Thomas Carlyle. The first duty of man is to conquer fear. He must get rid of it. He cannot act till then. What a great sentence. Salvador Dali. Have no fear of perfection. You'll never reach it. I think by saying that, Salvador Dali has reached perfection. You know. Chanakya. As soon as fear approaches near, attack and destroy it. Baruch Spinoza. There is no hope unmingled with fear, and no fear unmingled with hope. H.P. Lovecraft. The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. I will tell you, the oldest and strongest emotion of man is wonder. It's not fear. It's awe. It's reverence. It's like, whoa, something's happening. You know? It's not fear. Fear has been given too much of a loud voice, and when it does, of course, everybody's going to fear. Chanakya says we should not fret for what is past, nor should we be anxious about the future. Men of discernment deal only with the present moment. Sophocles. To him who is in fear, everything rustles. Fyodor Dostoevsky. There are things which a man is afraid to tell even to himself, and every decent man has a number of such things stored away in his mind. John Dryden. Boldness is a mask for fear, however great. Boldness is a mask for fear. I mean, we should think of it this way, that boldness is just noticing the opportunity. It's not per se a mask for fear. Now, if we want to say that, like, noticing the opportunity because we fear extinction, like, is our civilization has to be bold, and its ethos is a mask. John Dryden, though, he's sharing his ultimate view. He says boldness is a mask for fear, however great. That means it's an ultimate mask. I could say boldness is just engaging with the event, engaging with the design. It's trying to see the possibility of a phenomenon. Eric Hoffer says, we have perhaps a natural fear of ends. We would rather be always on the way than arrive. Given the means, we hang on to them and often forget the ends. Eric Hoffer says the fear of becoming in quotations, has been, keeps some people from becoming anything. And guys, I feel I want to read a quote from Fyodor Dostoevsky. Fyodor Dostoevsky says, man is fond of counting his troubles, but he does not count his joys. If he counted them up as he ought to, he would see that every lot has enough happiness provided for it. There is no subject so old that something new cannot be said about it. Fyodor Dostoevsky. He says, one can know a man from his laugh, and if you like a man's laugh before you know anything of him, you may confidently say that he's a good man. Okay. It's like Dostoevsky, I think he had dreams of being a stand-up comedian, maybe. Dostoevsky says we sometimes encounter people, even perfect strangers, who begin to interest us at first sight, somehow suddenly, all at once, before a word has been spoken. Dostoevsky says much unhappiness has come into the world because of bewilderment and things left unsaid. The greatness of happiness is to know the source of unhappiness. Fyodor Dostoevsky, happiness does not lie in happiness, but in the achievement of it. It seems, in fact, as though the second half of a man's life is made up of nothing but the habits he has accumulated during the first half. Wow, wow, wow. Not per se the case due to the globalization of the information, but it's still an important implication. Last quote to read. Actually, it's not. I'm going to read a bit more. He says, "To live without hope is to cease to live. Beauty is mysterious as well as terrible. God and devil are fighting there, and the battlefield is the heart of man." Fyodor Dostoevsky says, "Man only likes to count his troubles, but he does not count his joys." Fyodor Dostoevsky says, "Happiness does not lie in happiness, but in the achievement of it." Realists do not fear the results of their study. A real gentleman, even if he loses everything he owns, must show no emotion. Money must be so far beneath a gentleman that it is hardly worth troubling about. Wow. Fyodor Dostoevsky says, "Power is given only to those who dare to lower themselves and pick it up. Only one thing matters, one thing, to be able to dare." And that's the point, guys. That's my whole... I gave a talk yesterday about don't step out of the 4 billion-year-old Ferrari. That evolution is a rare opportunity, and the only thing that man can do is roar in the world he is in once. Every day happens once, then that chapter finished and the page is turned. And the pages are being turned, and what is being written in the notebook of the stars? Dostoevsky says, man, so long as he remains free, has no more constant and agonizing anxiety than find as quickly as possible someone to worship. That means freedom without direction. It's very possible it becomes worship. Fyodor Dostoevsky says, if there is no God, everything is permitted. I honestly feel the word law probably derives from some religious perspective. Dostoevsky says, to love someone means to see him as God intended him. Fyodor Dostoevsky says, the cleverest of all, in my opinion, is the man who calls himself a fool at least once a month. You know, we are all fools in a universe that is way more bigger and unknown than we know ourselves to be. We're all fools. The issue is that what are the fools doing? Fyodor says if you were to destroy the belief in immortality in mankind, not only love but every living force on which the continuation of all life in the world depended would dry up at once. Exactly. There is a continuity factor that nobody loves to... You can say the idea of the archetype of love, it's not destructive. You know? That means you can't say you can hurt someone and say simultaneously you love them. You know, you haven't cared for them if you are hurting someone. You know, that literally means, that's what it means. It's like, here's the thing. Human beings, they like having objects, but they don't like to be treated by like objects, but their science has only made them actually be nothing else other than objects. So it's this strange situation where we're considering we are a material entity, yet we don't want to be treated like objects. Isn't that hilarious? That's hilarious to me. That, like, you know how many people in history have shouted at the sky, don't treat me like an object, don't treat me like an object, you know? Sometimes I look at people and I don't say it, but I sometimes want to say, hey man, don't treat me as a subject. For what is the human being is an animate attention. Fyodor Dostoevsky says, if you were to destroy the belief in immortality in man... Oh no, I read that. Dostoevsky says, a novel is a work of poetry. In order to write it, one must have tranquility of spirit and of impression. Yeah, he's a Russian novelist. Novels are powerful works of analysis of human nature, I find. Guys, let me just check the origin of the word law, just for the sake of it. Okay, actually it's Germanic. Old Norse. There we go. It comes from Nordic. That means, Odin was watching. So here it's saying it's Old English. 1640s. Is that when the idea really became solid in the 1640? In 1640s, I think people began actually utilizing the concept of law. Or I don't know. No. Of course not. Not. It was much more ancient than that. But I'm saying it maybe in language it began. It was stabilized in 1640s. Because you see, law, there was a certain concept of royalty back in the day, and the royalty was seen as divine. The more we became secular, the less human being. It was as if human beings fell from the heavens of our eyes. For me, law is an invisible wall that is necessary, similar to how your house requires walls. You know. Guys, before man's law, of course, it was nature's law. And nature's law was the law of jungle. That means if you could handle it, you'd live on. If you couldn't, you'd die. So I would say there has been the notion of law. It's just been a law that nobody, it was a free for all. You could even see that as the law of back in the day, you know. For me, there is a power to the attention. For me, the same way the Jedi had a lightsaber, my mind feels like that lightsaber. My attention feels like when my attention moves, I could hear the lightsaber sound effects when my head turns. We have to care for the world that we see or we don't see, and we have to also care for the world that sees us and the world that doesn't see us. That means it was a very big moral hassle for me, where I was staring at the blank page for a while, wondering what does it mean to be good in a changing world when the reference points we're using to identify what is good and bad is changing. You know, that there was a time where people wore top hats. Now you wear a top hat, people are like, "Oh, you're into magic?" You're like, so so what's happening is that the behavior is justifying what is normal, the accepted behavior. So you can say the fear of society is the fear that your behavior isn't accepted. But do you think this Greek god, what is this, Zeus? Do you think this Zeus in the wallpaper right now cares if he's accepted by that giant? You see, after some point, it's not about a morality outside of your own eyes, because that morality is not justified from you. That means if you believe something to be good but you don't know why, then it's as if you have just accepted a definition without actually looking at it. You know? It's like a person drinking a glass of orange juice and thinking they're immortal, thinking that was immortal orange juice. You know, just like just like imagine the hammer of the gods, like Thor's hammer fell from the clouds. Imagine like um, from the refrigerator of the gods, a bottle of orange juice fell, and a human being was thirsty, was like, hey, orange juice from the sky, why not? Now, a very nice angle to approach the title, Who is Defining the Fear? We gotta say the child doesn't define itself. And so there is the environment, so a lot of people's fears could not be their fears. There could be fears because they've identified with an environment they're allowing themselves to have. There were some things that I feared, but then actually when I looked through my own eyes, there was nothing to fear about it. There's an intelligence. There's a scene in the movie Gladiator that is incredible. And I think it's a deleted scene. There's a scene before, maybe it's not a deleted scene, I don't know. But there was a scene where it's before the end where Maximus goes into the gladiator arena, where he fights like the spoiled king, the spoiled emperor, and before he's lifted up into the Colosseum from underneath it, he's shackled, his hands are chained, and his friend, the general, at the end where he tells the soldiers not to get involved, you know, that general who becomes his true friend, before Maximus goes up, right, they somehow get a control of the army, and the general comes up, not the general, the commanding officer, the guy who was Maximus's friend, he comes up to Maximus while he's shackled underneath the Colosseum and says, Maximus, I can get you out of here, something like that. The men are here, the army's here or something. And Maximus looks at him and just smiles and says nature never puts a person, he doesn't say exactly these words, but this is the idea of it, where he says nature never puts you in a situation where it hasn't also prepared you for. So nature has given you the strength actually to endure to what happens to you, you know? And he says that and he goes through. And he goes and he kills the king with his own hand, which was like, I would say, the most incredible. The movie Gladiator, guys, was so ahead of its time. So you see, it's a sort of the Maximus in that scene. he was he was willing to see how the unknownness of the moment unfolds. And I think this is really what sets apart the human beings that actually see the world and are trying to live it, and the human beings that are just trying to live in the world through their inner realms. Because at some point of looking at the natural world, you notice it's an event that is not in sync with your mind. You know, that means the person has to move with the world if they want to stay in the world. Those who renounce the world for freedom, if they are meant to, their attention will go outside of this dimension. If they are meant to, if they still have work to do, they could understand as much emptiness, but they will still be pulled towards their individuality. Because the notion of enlightenment from a Buddhic standpoint, it was as if the difference between the Buddha and the Bodhisattva. The Buddhic figure was seeking self-enlightenment. What does that mean? That means the person was in a personal hell, and they wanted to go into a personal heaven. So when the person becomes a Buddha, awakened, you can say the Buddha managed to overcome the personal hell, and to attain the personal heaven. They managed to get to in a personal dimension to heaven as an individual. Now here's the difference between the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva has done, the Buddha is going from the bottom of the mountain, from the personal hell, to the top of the mountain, which is the personal heaven. Now, after you have attained the personal heaven, that's when you notice the impersonal hell. You notice the collective hell. I'm just trying to give words to it. You notice the collective hell, and the Bodhisattva was identifying with the collective heaven. You see, even though man in Abrahamic thought descended from the heavens, even though in Abrahamic thought man descended from the heavens, earth is the only way where we can experience a collective heaven. That means there's this notion where, this was what was strange to me, where I'm like, wait a minute, like religion has a deep ethos to it and a narrative and it's a very unique story that's just been part of history, that's just pushed itself into history. But what if we require to build paradise on earth? What if paradise is an approach to the realm? What does that mean? That means you look at the Rubik's Cube and the algorithm is your approach. So much of this life, the stories can be reduced to just events of design. For me, there is a way I look at life and it geometrically translates, even when I speak. Robert says, how do you identify and confront your personal hell? Very easy, Robert. You realize you were never in it. When I say you were never in it, I'm not trying to reject the suffering that the physical being can experience on this planet. I'm just saying that an idea cannot die. A subject can't break like an object. At most, there was a time I attempted, I created even the term eventum. I was like, I looked at particles and I'm like, okay, we call that an atom. And then I looked at the psychology of the human being. And when I looked at memories, the memories seemed to be an event. where we are consciously retaining a certain percentage of it. So I wondered, I created this term eventum as as the smallest event, as if our psychology is made of, just our body is made of small atoms, our mind is made of eventums. And so I don't know. There are some fears. Like if you want to speak, Robert, I don't know in what way you're asking that question. The personal hell is your inner realms. It's not, it's like a stoic approach where Epictetus says we suffer not from the events inside our life, but from the judgments we have about them. Yeah, something like that. That means you don't suffer when a physical event takes place, even though there could be pain. The pain is you can interpret it as suffering, or you can interpret it as just an event. That means one thing I've gotten comfortable with in this life is to notice how it happens. It happens, this life. It occurs, whether you are rational or irrational. That's the mind of nature. You think the mind of nature cares about how man is interpreting nature? You think a lion roaring at a nature photographer is going to understand the nature photographer's freedoms and rights? You know, the lion is going to just savagely roar, and the nature photographer is going to be like, "I wish I had a jetpack right now." You know. Okay, so CPT says something very interesting, guys, in the chat section. Interesting question. You say, how about that place that can be experienced while meditating, which feels like you can stay there and rest for as long as you want, but it's timeless, and the next moment you come back to consciousness? What is the purpose of rest? Why do people rest? So they have energy to work again. If oneness and the Taoistic presence behind the scenes of reality, that is the prime mover, attributeless mover, if one identifies with that, it is possible. But the thing is that the collective hell will stop you from just, you could see the value of your individual enlightenment shrink. You know what it is? It's as if like you win one soccer game and then you realize there's a more important soccer game to play. So I would say my approach is I've dwelled in a void in my experience, in the voids of my experience. What really happens is the world moves before you, so you feel you know everything. But you feel you're going with the flow, and your intuition is like it's a way where I'm just saying that rest, like even Tilopa. Here, I'll share a quote with you, CPT, in the chat section. What was the quote? Tilopa rest quote. There we go. Tilopa is Buddhist sage, Tibetan Buddhist sage. He says, Saint Jerome? No, that's not Tilopa. Just a second, guys. Oh, there we go. Tilopa. Let go of what is happening now. Don't try to figure anything out. Don't try to make anything happen. Relax right now and rest. That is the solution to the personal hell, poetically speaking. Because you got to think about it this way. Where does freedom come from? And if you are identifying as a physical phenomenon, then it's a physical condition. You know, that means heaven for you is has a certain entrance, it has a certain gate, it has a certain, it's like its own unique room. But if the person realizes heaven is a level of experience, you know, it's an opportunity. It's just our collective identity. People don't have just one identity. They always have a collective identity. The same way, like a leaf moving in a river. The leaf has an identity that is itself, just the leaf's reality, and then it's the river's intelligence that's moving it. And we are in a river of life intelligence. So I would say that certain moments in life, this is why I think the concept I'm using of the pilot, because I was thinking about the idea of like the yogi and the meditator, and of course I have learned much from yogic wisdom, but I developed this idea way, like this is from a few years ago, I'm just resurfacing the idea, but I had this notion of the pilots of consciousness. I realized in the future, 4 billion years, we're going to have pilots coming to the world and wanting to recruit interstellar pilots. Then that sci-fi inner realm vision, I noticed, in some sense, I realized that could be the same for the inner realms. So we have pilots in front of our eyes, and I thought of starting this sort of pilots academy of us wanting to pilot in our inner realms. So what I mean by that is every person I'm speaking to, I say it in other talks, I only see human beings as either advanced communicators or pilots. And it depends on their sensitivity. The pilot is navigating the meaning of the plane of existence. The advanced communicator is like the stewardess. You know how in airplanes there's the pilot and there's the stewardess? And every person in existence is the passenger in the plane of existence. Now, we got to keep in mind, if we take the pilot analogy, the journey is not over. And I feel that's the healthiest approach to life. Because if you want to, contain life in narrative, you can make its glow diminish instantly. Do you know that seeing beauty, you can say, is a process of the mind? And so you can say if it's a process, it can have a counter process. So beauty is something that someone can do something and you'd be like, how beautiful. And then somebody could do something and you're like, oh my God, how ugly. Like, so you see, it's like an instant, there's a piloting component. I'm saying on some level, we're just creatures of attention. Attributeless attention, watching the attributes it's identifying with. So the more of a metaphysical approach we have to reality, the more we see physical reality was not physical reality. So what happens is we're not saying that materialism is wrong, we're just saying is matter matter. We know that matter matters, but we're saying is matter just matter. I feel there is an additional dimension of intelligence to our creaturehood, unlike any of the creatures on this planet. It's as if we were the animal that had fingers and, imagine the sun's light beams. We're going to take a sci-fi approach to this. The sun's light beams were transmission signals of life. Imagine we became a, type, even let's say to a point where we became a type 3 civilization and we mastered the technology of we became an advanced human civilization, an interstellar one, and we could harness our sun to a point where we could make the sun transmit, because light is an energy, is the smallest energy carrier system, So I personally feel light is geometrical information, and I feel light Poetically, not poetically, actually very seriously, I feel light has sculpted intelligence in potentially intelligent particles. So light is the reason they worshipped it, the ancient Greeks, because that's where life could see itself. Consciousness is light. So I could tell you E equals mc squared has psychological value, that formula. It's just we need to find how we can connect the atom to how Mr. Within says eventum. Because all of human life is either you're moving first and the world is being defined out of how your attention moves, or the world is moving your attention and yourself is being defined based on how the world moves you. All those people waiting for a savior, they're actually waiting for the world to move them. All those people who are trying to save the world, they are actually moving the world. They're moving their self first. So it's like chess, whether you're starting as the white pieces or the black pieces. You know, if you start as the white pieces, your strategy is the offense. You know, if you start at the black as the black pieces in chess, you're not actually, you should just build strong defenses. So when I play chess with someone, for example, um, I mean, here's the thing. Just if I'm the black pieces, there's some people I know, they only play the black chess pieces. They play chess, but they only play as the black pieces. They don't play as the white pieces. And I ask them why. And they're like, because it's easy to be on a defensive strategy and the one who's attacking to wait for it to make a mistake and then you attack. So the defensive strategy becomes more a strategy that is waiting for the opportunity. The offensive strategy is making the opportunity. So that's what I mean in a mystical context and in an advanced, for the advanced communicators out there, that you have to study now. We are reaching a point in our human evolution where it's crucial to notice if there is an inseparability between the individual's behavior and activities and with the cosmic activity which arises as one event. Because we can ask this question, is time a big enough container to contain the truth of reality? Somebody asked Plato, it's like, hey Plato, what time is it? I'm late for work, you know? And Plato was like, time, and he realized he didn't have a sundial with him or anything. He's like Plato didn't know the answer, but he was a philosopher, and he's like, okay. And he looks at the guy and he says, time is the moving image of eternity. That's what time it is, you know? It's eternity time, you know? And the guy's like, Plato, I'm late for work, man. What the fuck? The quote is accurate, but the story I animated. That means, is time a suggestion of how eternity is moving? You know? Questions can go deep. So who is defining the fear? Some believe it to be the man in the mirror. Some people believe it's the man before the mirror. I would say fear, because it appears in different modes, it's never one thing. So if for the person to think that they have a fear of heights, it's not the same height. So if somebody was specific, but they would say, okay, so what kind of height do you fear? Like 100 meters, 200 meters, a meter, you know, like what kind of height do you fear? Do you see? So you see the fear is not the same. Even though we generalize it as like, I got a fear of heights, you know, but it's not the same height. You never are fearing the same kind of height. Maybe it's after a certain elevation where the being just feels they might not have control that they fear. Something you notice incredible about fear, you see it in movies when the guy is walking past, like, not a bridge but a beam between, like, like a canyon or something, and the friend of the person's like, and they have no choice, they're running away from something. The person who doesn't has a fear of heights, if you notice in the movie, what do? They close their eyes and they're like, "Don't look down, don't look down." Or sorry, they don't close their eyes. They keep walking forward and they're like, "Don't look down." They talk to themselves. So what happens in the face of fear or any uncontrollable factor is that an inner realm dialogue takes place. And that inner realm dialogue is an analysis of how the outer event is echoing into your psychology, which is a testament to how fragmented your psychology is, or how instantly you're aware it's unified. You got to think about it this way. There is weak people in this world, and there's also strong people in this world. Okay, both of them exist. So we got to think there is people who are afraid and people who are not afraid. And when we went to see how those people are not afraid, is because they saw something in the moment that was way more important than the fear. So the fear didn't stop the person from living their life. Because the microphone is in your hand every day once. So Charles Godwin in the chat section says, "Where the event horizon, where the infinitely large meets the infinitely small." Yeah, man, nice word choice. Yeah. The language threshold was also my way of saying, like, just like we have an event horizon for a black hole where light we can't see because the gravitation is so intense, light can't escape. So a black hole is like a strange hole where light is just exiting. It's an exit which we're not allowed to go in. And if we go inside a black hole, we would perhaps dismantle as form. It would be an instantaneous non-existence. Perhaps, who knows? Maybe we go through a black hole and we're like, no way, there's another universe back here. You know? Portal theory stands for all unknown variables, you know? Even emptiness for me. There was a point where I'm like, could emptiness actually not be empty? Could it be just one side of the coin? So guys, there's no point of fearing life, because, like, where is the boundary? Like, who is defining the fear? Like, the fear, even if somebody believes they're afraid of something, I mean, you're changing. So technically, it's not the same person even to fear the same thing, you know? So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I mean, honestly, it's an opportunity cost. That's the best thing you can say about fear. The same time the person's being afraid is the same time where you could not be. You could just implement a different application of your vision, you know? So there is a fear that is self-created, which is unnecessary, and meditation and mindfulness and all of these have attempted to seek it, to attain that. to notice that. And then there's a fear which you got to actually look at the events of a world. That means it's like if you're in the middle, if you're running past the highway, then that's like your fear is not just from your inner realms at that point, you know? The fear, like if you're Eddie Murphy in that movie scene, you know? You allow fear to stay in your to you allow fear to enter your mind. That means you didn't respect your home. You didn't respect the temple and the sophistication of your intelligence as a human being, you know? The only way there can be a justified inner realm fear is if the person is cornered, like a cornered animal psychology, you know? Charles says, is it in the chat section, is it a limit or a creative guideline, our choice? Your choice is the steering wheel. And your choice, what is happening before you make the choice, is attention to landscape in an instant. So the instantaneity of the attention to the landscape renders absence of meaning before, and it's like, it's, you know what it is? It's like existence exists, but the experience hasn't defined how the existence exists. So the experience has a freedom to redefine. And I've at some point I felt I was like trapped in being a creature of language. And then guys, let me relocate. The sun is like burning my shoulder. Geometrical information is burning my shoulder right now. Just a second, guys. Just a second. Okay, so needed a quick intermission there, guys. So yeah, pretty much the notion of fear is that when you realize, when you wonder about who's defining it, you see that you're alive and your free will can direct this life. You know, from an unconscious angle, we were intelligent creatures, but our intelligence didn't have a direction because it didn't identify itself as like a pen that could write on an empty page. The moment we could identify that our intelligence was like a brush, that there was some sort of free will or creative effort, then the free will is like the what one is using as a guiding force, I would say. That means the free will is the greatest guide, you know, I would say. There's many people who consider the notion of spirit guides. I would say your free will is the how your spirit is guided. It's like the steering wheel. For me, my free will suggests how I animate. So for me, it's as if like the soul doesn't even have a shape. I don't know how people are justifying a reincarnation, even. For me, after some point, it's like the watcher of the moment is not an idea. But it doesn't mean just because the watcher of the moment is not the idea that everything has to just be the watcher, you know? Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I'm going to share a Discord link. I'll be in the Discord server if people have questions or want to discuss something.